After the 1920 fires, Rylah Institute, part of DELP, have been looking at the response or recovery of our biodiversity. And as part of that, a series of field surveys for the threatened plant species around Mallacoota, Genoa and other areas in East Gippsland have just been finished. So we're keen this morning to learn about where recovery is at. And to help us, I'm joined by Annette Muir. She's a senior plant ecologist with the Rylah Institute. And welcome, Annette.
Thank you, Paris. Thanks. I'm happy to be talking to you today.
So is this the first opportunity you've had to survey the recovery? And what sort of environments or areas were you primarily having a look at?
Yes. Like everyone with the COVID situation, we weren't going anywhere, and then it was a big rush to get down there. So we were lucky enough to get down in early October and work through October and November, and we looked at a range of environments, right through from coastal heathlands, Banksia woodlands, eucalypt forest, some of the swamp scrubs, vegetation along the rivers, along the rocky rivers, and some rainforests. And so that was all around the sort of Mallacoota, Genoa area that we're talking about today, but more broadly in the whole bushfire area in East Gippsland. And our particular focus was looking at threatened or endangered and rare plant species.
So can you take us through, I want to hear some of the good news first. What plants were kind of rejuvenating well and perhaps responding, I guess, to these unusual weather patterns we've had of late too?
Yeah. Well, I guess unfortunately there's been some good rains, and I suppose the response of the different vegetation types and plants was kind of to be expected, that in that, for example, the coastal heathlands, the things that the areas that people would see around Shipwreck Creek and other similar areas, respond quite quickly, and they have a lot of plants that resprout. There was mass flowering of things. People probably noticed the native iris at the Mallacoota airfield, for example. But there was many things, resprouting very vigorously and flowering in those environments. Similarly, in areas that where there's been more sunlight, obviously, less canopy and less competition from plants on the ground, there was a very good season for ground orchids, coming up and flowering en masse. So some of the things that really, I think, strike people. The other things, just from a visual point of view, you would have seen the masses of grass trees, particularly in the swampy areas, just with their huge flower spikes, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, and also the crimson bottle brushes as well, looking very, very red and colourful. So they're the things that I guess strike you immediately in this post-fire, or this 9 months after the fire kind of thing.
Yeah, I must say, to see the mass of the Xanthorrhoea has been really uplifting around town. Were there any real surprises that you weren't expecting at all?
Well, not. I wouldn't say surprises, because I think it's sort of well established that, as I said, vegetation like heathlands recovers quite quickly, and rainforests obviously less so. Are more affected by fires and take longer. But having said that, going into some of the rainforest gullies, and some did, escape the fires, and others were burned. We did see quite a number of the tall shrub species resprouting, like the lily pillies. So it will take time, and obviously there will be some changes, but there was a tremendous amount even there of resprouting from of those trees that would, or the sort of small trees, I suppose, like lily pillies that would have formed the canopy before the fires. So that, and I don't know if people know the water gum or canuka that's along some of the rivers, particularly the rocky rivers. That they were resprouting as well. Along with some of the rare plants, which we'll get onto talking about, obviously.
How is this regrowth kind of changing the structure of the environment at the moment? Are we seeing, certain areas that might have been classified as one type actually shifting because of that regrowth pattern?
Yeah, not in a complete shift. I guess all of these changes are often incremental. I guess getting back to the rainforest example, where the core areas of the rainforest, are recovering at a certain rate, but it's around the fringes where they dry out a bit, where there's the possibility that some of those drier species, eucalypts and other drier species, will creep in at the edges. So I suppose there is that possibility in some areas that rainforest patches may get smaller. But I suppose it's early days yet, and that's something we would need to monitor over time.
With the birds and reptile species, where we're hearing accounts of them perhaps turning up outside of their normal ranges following the fires. Have there been plants that are doing a similar thing that wouldn't have been anticipated? Perhaps there's been seed dormant in the soil for so long or something like that?
Yeah, look, and I say this is not very much an orchid expert. There are many better people than I to talk about this, but certainly orchid species that will come up after fires that haven't been seen for some time, primarily because there's the removal of the competition and the more sunlight as well.
What were some of the rare and endangered plants, or I guess, were there any rare and endangered plants found? That'd be the first question, and if so, what were they?
Yeah, so we often joke that it's a bit like looking for a needle in a haystack, looking for rare and endangered plants, because they're naturally in low numbers, and some of the records were from many years ago. So the location details might be a bit dodgy, and sometimes they're very difficult to get into. So some ones we haven't actually got to because of just access problems. But we did find quite a number, and I suppose if I could just mention a few of them. In the different environments we went to. So in the coastal heathlands, we saw a couple of interesting plants there, the sword bossia and the heathy merbelia, both low sort of shrubs, and they're both in flower, resprouting quite happily. And then we also saw, so these are a small sort of, heathy plants. In and around Mallacoota, we saw the lilac lily, which is I'm saying the common names. I hope that's probably the best way to say that. And one of the rare brachyscomes, and also Brunoniella, the dwarf Brunoniella near Mallacoota. So yeah, there was quite a number of those sort of things in the low understory, which is just regenerating very vigorously at the moment. We're still obviously seeing a change in the tree canopy. There's the shrub layers missing, but at the ground level, there's this sort of riot of regrowth, and we did find some of those threatened species, along with the Betka bottlebrush along the Betka River, obviously. So that was good to see that resprouting. And another a fern called the shiny fan fern was another one we found along one of the rivers. So yes, we did find some of them. We didn't find others, but with the ones we didn't find, we're not sure if we didn't find them because they've disappeared or we just didn't find them. So I guess more searching to be done.
Yeah, I was going to ask, have to ask what the bad news was. So there were a few species then that you expected to see and didn't, I presume.
Yeah, that's right. We had a very long list of plants that had most of their distribution burnt at quite a high severity level. In other words, they only really occur in the areas that the bushfires were. So we had this list and where they'd been found before, and there was quite a number we didn't find. But as I say, in some cases that was unclear if that was the effects of the fire or we just didn't find them.
Yeah.
Because of inaccurate locations or other problems. Yeah.
Are there any of those environments you've described that aren't recovering as you hoped or imagined at this point? Or is it hard because there's not a textbook, I guess?
Yeah. Oh, no. I think, it's sort of reasonably well established how different vegetation types there's sort of succession stages after fire. I mean, I guess it sort of depends on how intense the fire was at those sites. Some of the areas were burned at very hot intensities, as people know, and everything was kind of gone, and now things are sort of just coming back slowly at ground level, and the epicormic growth up the eucalypts and so on. Other areas were quite lightly burnt, so only just burned underneath, and the tree canopy is still intact. So that's one thing. It depends on how intense the fire was at those sites. But also, once again, I guess the rainforests are the ones that take the longest, mostly because they're not they're not an environment that experiences fire very often. So, but as I said, there are plants resprouting and lots of new growth, so it will just take longer to recover the shady structure and all those vines that sort of creep up over things. But they're certainly reshooting very vigorously. So I think there's I think that the overall picture is that plants are pretty resilient and they are growing back now. Every plant won't grow back in every spot where it once was, and there will be some areas where the vegetation won't recover quite as well. But I guess it's a matter. I guess it's time scale as well. It's I guess it's a matter of waiting to see what happens.
The old patience.
Yeah, that's it.
When you're doing a field survey like this, do you have little plots, like 10 by 10 metre kind of plots you really focus on, or do you go in a whole area? How's it usually undertaken?
Yeah, so we've had the old records of where people have found these plants before, so it's a bit of a treasure hunt. You go with your GPS and your coordinates and start at that point, and recognising there's always a bit of an error in the technology and the old records as well, and we have a certain search area around that, and if we want to record all species at that site, we would have a set plot size, but so we search, at a reasonable distance around the original point, so that we're sure we've given it a good go, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay.
And knowing the sort of environments that species should occur in helps too. You're looking for the sorts of other species it normally grows with.
So what's next for this research? Like, I assume that it will also, or I wonder whether it will also be fed into field surveys being done by other researchers to help with perhaps fauna knowledge. Is that part of it?
Yeah. So I think you might have mentioned that there's part of this biodiversity bushfire response and recovery program, which is a Victorian government program. There's other surveys going on for other animals, gliders, lizards, and so on. And also, I should mention that the Royal Botanic Gardens is also doing threatened plant surveys as well. So all of this data, will be brought together in different ways, and to look at what's the story emerging from this, and are there sort of management actions needed afterwards, and where there may need to be further surveys or monitoring. For example, I mentioned the rainforest before. That's something that will need attention over time in terms of monitoring to see what's happening around their fringes. But yeah, there's a range of things that could come out of this work. Obviously, there's a lot of work being done locally by local residents and groups like the Far East Victoria Landcare Group and so on. So there'll be individual species work where those species haven't recovered from fires. I hope I can just mention now the Genoa River Correa, which I guess is one that's of concern in the Mallacoota area. We didn't see it, but we were trying to get around to a lot of places. So I think some more concerted searching, and also there's the opportunity for some off-site conservation, seed collection, propagation, replanting. But that's something that's outside our work. But there's very good work going on in the community with this sort of stuff.
Yeah, there certainly is. And I wondered whether it is going to be possible for local community groups to tap into this knowledge or what's coming out of these surveys to supplement their efforts in seed collection and propagation? Is it going to be published and available?
Oh, yes. So the plan is, we've had this big push on to collect data. We'll have a little break, and then back in the new year we'll be compiling the data, writing up a report, and that'll be widely available, that information to people. So the hope is obviously where we haven't been able to put in the effort. There are many other people who've have contributed their knowledge to this. So I might mention Gary Backhouse with orchids and others who have contributed data, or just information on where these threatened plants are and have they recovered from the fires, because we had limited a limit on our time and we had a lot of places to visit. So, in some cases we didn't search every place that we could have. So, we would welcome any additional information. So it's sort of a two-way thing. We would welcome any additional information from people who know their patch really well, but also where the intention is that this will be disseminated, and so people can then use what we found to then add on to the work or the conservation efforts they're making.
Fantastic. Well, I'm so glad that your group did manage to come up and start this work, very important work to try and understand what's going on. So thank you so much for your time this morning, Annette, and we'll try and keep track of where it's at and how it unfolds in the future.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
You're plant ecologist with the Rylah Institute for Environmental Research, and if you do come across something a little bit unusual or one of those rare and endangered plants, they'd love to hear from you. So you are welcome to contact her through the ARI website. If you have a look up Rylah Institute, it does have all of the researchers' contact details and their research projects listed. The researchers would also like to acknowledge that local groups like the Far East Victoria Landcare, Australasian Native Orchid Society, local residents, DELP and Parks Victoria staff are working on conserving plants and animals